Welcome to Adulting Decrypted, the show where we break down the complex code of common conundrums into logical living, an effort to decrypt the code we call adulting. We are your hosts.
I'm Gene, the 17-year-old.
I'm Roscoe, the dad.
I'm Ashton. I'm wearing a comfortable sweater at the moment because it's a little chilly in the woodshed.
I am also wearing a little comfy sweater. My name is Gideon. Today we have a special guest with us. Grandpa, would you like to share with us who you are?
Wow.
Yes.
Hi, Grandpa. How's it going?
That was a great introduction.
You want to know who I am?
Well, yep, for the listeners.
Okay. I am Ashley Allen. I was raised 3 miles from the Navajo Indian Reservation in Kanab, Utah. So my Yate name is So'oyez.
What does that mean?
That means little bib overalls.
Oh, I like it.
That's way cool.
Well, so you said you live next to Kanab. What did you guys do?
Well, just a really brief background. There were 16 of us in our family. My mother, one father, and 14 children. And we all lived and scraped out a living in Kanab area. Traveled some up down the state hauling produce and different items for sale. And 13 of the 14 of us were raised to adulthood. And we had a sister that was just older than I am that passed away when she was 2. When I was born, we had a dirt floor in our home, and we had a wood fireplace for heat, and all of our food we cooked over Dutch oven fires or on a stove in the kitchen when we were home.
Cool. So something cool about this episode. This is our supposed to be Thanksgiving episode, if I am not mistaken.
You are not. That is correct.
Gobble, gobble.
Yes.
So, in a little bit further introduction, when he calls him Grandpa, this is my dad. And Dad, you were born what year?
1948.
1948, and Kanab is in southern Utah. For those who aren't familiar with, it's down on the very edge of the corner of the state. So yeah, there's a little bit more intro, and how befitting that this is our Thanksgiving episode, and we've already started talking about Native Americans as well as as well as the people who lived with them. Grandpa spent a lot of time down there, right, with the Navajo Nation, like you said. He was Little Bib Overalls, because who was Big Bib Overalls, Dad?
That would be my father, Philo Allen. He always wore bib overalls, and so with me being the 9th of 10 boys, I always had a small pair of bib overalls that had been handed down from 2 or 3 brothers, so they were always a little bit too big for me, along with the hand-me-down shoes and things.
Yeah, that's way cool. And I think part of Gideon, Gideon's going to get into this more, but part of this episode is it's so special because we just want you to get to know Grandpa, right? Talk about thankfulness and how fun that is.
Yeah.
There we go.
So, I know that you have a whole bunch of cool history stories about our family, and I'm wondering if you'd like to share a couple of them.
Sure. When my mother and father were married in 1924, they started their married life with all the necessities of life. They had a buckboard, 2 horses, and a log cabin to live in. And they had a 160 acres farm that belonged to my dad's mother. And they worked that farm. It's right north of the Bryce Canyon National Park in a canyon called Casto.
Hey, there's a question on the story of how the farm stayed in the family. I think is one of the stories that the kids think that I'm telling a wise tale on, but we need to hear the story of the Casto farm because your dad's dad passed away.
Yes. My dad's dad was John Butler Allen. He passed away when my dad was 12 years old. My dad had older brothers that had gone off to fight in the war.
What war would that have been?
That would have been the Second World War, not the Civil War. I'm not that old. Anyway, so Dad was left as the man of the house with his mother and with 3 younger sisters. And
Wait, and he was 12 at the time,
yes,
right? That's crazy.
That would have been World War One then, wouldn't it?
that would have been World War One. Yeah, my bad.
The Great War. The
Yeah,
war to end all wars.
It was me that was born 20 years later, 24 years later after the Second World War. So
Yep.
You're correct, World War One. Anyway, so Grandpa passed, and my dad was left to run the farm, and he got sick and laid in bed and almost paralyzed for a year with they called a Bright disease back then. And so the doctors told my grandmother to take him to St. George where the weather was warmer. He might have a better chance of surviving. So she sold the farm to my dad's oldest brother, and they moved to St. George. And that's where my dad met my mother. They were married in 1924 in St. George. And then they moved back to the farm on Casto, where they had the buckboard and a team of horses. And he sharecropped that farm with his oldest brother. So he did the work, and oldest brother took half of the profit, half of the produce, and that was the arrangement they had. They lived there for 2.5 years while my first 2 sisters were born, and then they decided it wasn't profitable enough, so they moved to Kanab, Utah, which is 60 miles south of that farm. And they had an old wooden shack that my dad put a roof on, and that's where the rest of my siblings were born, up until my little brother and I were born actually in hospital in Kanab, but the rest were born in the old wood house.
Actually, in that little shack.
And how big was that wood house, Dad?
It was about I do not remember it, so only pictures of it, but it looked like it was about 20 feet long and maybe 10 feet wide. Just a 1-room wooden shack. And after that burned down due to a fire in the wood stove that got out of control, then they built a 24-foot by 24-foot cinder block house, and it just had 3 rooms in it. It had a room for food storage, and it had Mom and Dad's bedroom, and then it had a kitchen, dining room, bedroom, and then we all slept up in the attic. We nailed cardboard to the rafters in the ceiling to try and get it warmer in the wintertime, and we slept up there. And summertime we always just slept outside.
I want to back up a second. That farm there in Casto Canyon, there's a story with Butch Cassidy or something.
Yes. My grandmother was 4th cousins to Robert Leroy Parker, a.k.a. Butch Cassidy. And he would come by the farm, and my grandmother would always prepare a meal for him, and then he'd be on his way. One time after Grandpa had passed, the banker was coming out to the farm to get a mortgage payment or repossess the farm. And she didn't have the money for that. And anyway, Butch showed up, and she fed him and told him that this was the last meal that she would be giving him because they were going to have the farm taken away. And he asked her how much money that she owed the bank, and the bank was a Richfield bank in Richfield, Utah. And I don't remember the exact dollar amount, but anyway, Butch told her, "I will pay for your mortgage, just get a receipt for it. Make sure you got it in writing that's paid for." And she said, "I don't want your money because I know that it was ill-gotten money and I can't do that." And he talked to her till he talked her into it. And so she took the money. The banker from Richfield showed up, and she paid him, paid off the mortgage, got the signed documents that everything was paid for. And then she was I'm sure thankful that he had helped her with that. And then a strange thing happened. The banker got back in Panguitch, Utah, which was 7 miles away, and he said, "Outside the gates at Allen Farm, Butch Cassidy robbed me and took all my money."
Yeah.
Well planned.
And I know that Butch Cassidy was a criminal, but I'm actually not super familiar with who he was. Like, I'm pretty sure you would know, but like, what did he do?
Well, he was the oldest of, I believe, 11 children, and they had a farm near Circleville, Utah, and his father and mother were struggling with the farm and a large family, like all of the early LDS pioneers in that area. And he just got tired of being poor all the time and decided that he would leave and go and work for another man, and this other man was a butcher. So Robert Leroy Parker went to work for this butcher and learned the butcher trade. And then he decided this is no fun working for a living, just cutting up animals. So he started robbing. He robbed the trains and robbed the stagecoaches and to get his money. And they called him the modern day Robin Hood because he was always doing things for everyone, just like he did for my grandmother.
That's neat. Thank you. Now, you said you were born in 1948, and at that point in time, the house that you were born in actually had no power. Is that correct?
There was, I believe there was electricity. We had a pull chain light in the front room, and we did not have a refrigerator. We did have a refrigerator, but it did not work. So we put ice in the bottom, and it was an ice chest to just keep our milk cold and that during the summer. We did not have indoor plumbing. We had an outhouse that was 50 yards away from the house so that it didn't stink in the house.
Yeah, I can imagine that would get pretty annoying. Like if you accidentally woke up in the middle of the night needing to use the restroom and walk out when it's freezing.
Yeah, you kind of run into your siblings heading back and forth through 6 inches of snow in your bare feet, getting out there real quick. But that just brought to my mind a thought. Right now, we're in this pandemic. There's a shortage of toilet paper and a shortage of sanitary wipes and things, Clorox wipes. Well, back then we didn't have toilet paper all of our toilet paper was free because Sears and Roebuck's and Montgomery Ward had annual catalogs that they gave out. So we drill a hole in the corner of this catalog that was an inch thick, and we drove a nail through it on the inside of the outhouse. And when we needed toilet paper, we just wiped our stinky on their inky.
Oh man.
You're like, I don't want to buy anything, but I will be using this catalog.
So to put that in, thank you, Dad. That was pretty good. But to put it in perspective, 1948, most people had had plumbing and stuff in big cities and lights. I mean, that was 48. They had cars and trucks and obviously end of World War II, tanks and the whole 9 yards, right? So you guys being in rural Utah were probably not very well off and kind of just trying to make a buy, right?
Yeah, we were just trying to do anything we could do to make a dollar to put food on the table, and we were the most destitute people in the town. Most people had the indoor plumbing and electricity and things, and so we just did without because we couldn't afford it.
Yeah, to kind of put that into perspective for myself, at least what I was thinking when you being born in 1948 was, I mainly think about coins because I've learned a lot about like coin history and stuff, and that's 20 years before even the dime stopped being silver, or at least partly silver, because I know that they stopped in 65, and so in 1965, I'm just thinking like how hard it is to find a 1965 dime, and like I don't know, it just feels like 1948 was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was actually the year before they invented water.
I wanted to ask a question. What was it like when they invented water? No, I'm just kidding. No, the real question is you talked about how you got even nicknames from the Native Americans, and I was just curious what it was like living with, or like if you have any stories about, that sort of lifestyle that you guys used to have in the country.
Most people now wouldn't understand what a cedar fence post is, as they're made out of metal now. But there's the juniper trees that are prevalent in southern Utah and all around. We would cut those into 7-foot lengths and chop all the limbs off of them and sell them to the farmers, and they would bury them and run their barbed wire to keep their cattle in their land.
Yeah.
So we would go out and with our 1.5-ton trucks, and we would live out in the mountains until we got a truckload of posts cut, and then we'd drive them back into town, and we would sell those, and then we also cut firewood. We'd cut up old pine trees and things for firewood and sell that as well.
I'm guessing that you were using axes and hatchets for all of this.
Yes, I cut 2.5 of my toes off with an axe doing that, standing on a tree.
2.5. What's the half?
Why'd I say a half? Because it didn't cut the whole toe off.
Just like the toenail.
So we did not. I was 30 miles out east of Kanab, in an area called Scoot'empaw, and we wrapped my foot up in my brother's T-shirt, and I bounced in the back of the old Chevy pickup all the way to Kanab.
Yeah.
And my mom and dad couldn't afford to take me to the doctor to get it sewn up. So she did what they called a honey and flour poultice. They put honey and flour and wrapped it up with strips of white sheet, hoping it wouldn't get infected.
Well, did they get infected?
Actually, it did, and I was so miserable. I was going over to my older brother's house to babysit for him and his wife so that they could go out. And I got there, I was crying, and I told him what happened to my foot. and he took the bandage off and looked at it, and that's the first time I heard a whole bunch of vulgar words I'd never heard before. And he took me to the hospital in Kanab, and they put 54 stitches in my toes and sewed me back together. And they charge $1 a stitch, and that was just when you're so destitute, that was really hard.
Right.
So my brother paid for it. He was working, had a good job, and so he paid for it. And then I paid him back at 25 cents an hour, babysitting his children when him and his wife wanted to go out until that debt was paid.
So when you were doing that for him, was 25 cents an hour a good rate for that sort of payback?
All the way through high school, 25 cents an hour was the standard going rate for if you pump gas. My first paying job was 12 years old. I worked at the Texaco gas station and pumped gas all day long for 25 cents an hour. That was another really hard summer. I worked all summer. We lived a mile out of town, and I wanted a bicycle really bad so I could ride a bicycle to get to school.
Yeah.
So I told my boss to just keep my money and pay me in one lump sum in September when school started. And then I could go down and buy me a new bicycle. So I'm not changing the name to protect the guilty here. His name was Leland L. Fredette, and he owed me $68.75. And my new bicycle cost $54, and he didn't pay me a penny for my whole summer's work.
That's crazy.
Wow.
He left town owing a lot of people money and me my money.
Right.
So the Texaco manager from Orderville, who owned the station, his name was Fred Heaton, and he knew that I'd worked there all summer. He knew I didn't get paid. So he asked me how much my new bicycle was, and I told him, and he sat right there and wrote a check and bought my bicycle.
Oh, wow, that's crazy.
For me.
Cool. So cool. So the guy just skipped town because, he just wanted to dodge paying people, basically? He earned his money for the summer, so he left?
He did. He just didn't have the money to pay me, and he just left, up and left. So
That's
I
cool.
learned then, at a very young age of 12, that there are bad people in the world who will rip you off if they get a chance, and there are good people who are honest and good and great souls, and Fred Heaton was one of those men. And I got my new bicycle so I could ride to school.
Nice.
That's a good thing.
I bet you Gideon's wishing right now he could buy the bicycle he likes for $50.
Oh, for $50, that'd be awesome.
Oh.
25 cents. Let's see. I'm going to do some quick math.
Dad's
Okay.
doing math on that.
Let's have Ashton do math.
So no thanks. So the 25 cents an hour would be then technically the minimum wage at that point.
Yeah,
I mean, it wasn't stated probably, but that would be kind of what it was.
Yeah, it was not stated. Now, we did make more money sometimes when the movies came to town. In Kanab, they made over 100 Western movies and shows. And when what they would do is they needed people they call extras to just kind of stand in or get painted up and be an Indian or put you in a cavalry uniform and ride a horse. And
Yeah.
so I always, the pay for that was $15 a day, which is a great jump over 25 cents an hour.
Yeah. It's a very large
Yeah,
job.
I'm
And then-
thinking like $68 for the whole summer for $15 a day.
Yeah.
That's gotta feel like a lot.
Yeah, so we ended up when the movies would come, they'd give you $15, and then if you got in a close up or if you'd ride a horse, they'd pay you $25 a day.
There you go.
So I'd never been on a horse in my life, and they asked me to be painted up like an Indian and ride a horse bareback and do a raid on the wagon train. And this wagon train series was filmed in 1963. It was the first colored wagon train movie that they produced.
Wow.
And so I was painted up Indian on a bareback pony, making a raid on the wagon train. And the President of the United States, Ronald Reagan, way back before he was president, was a star in that wagon train series. So I was in the movie with our president.
There you
That's
go.
cool.
That's cool. Yes, you starred with Ronald Reagan.
And with Sidney Poitier and James Garner and
Cool.
and Sammy Davis Jr. and Dean Martin and
So
a whole bunch of guys.
So it was true then that you had never ridden a horse bareback before, but you did it because of the pay, probably.
I got on him because it was $25 a day, not 25 cents an hour.
I remember this story, and they came up to you, you're like, well, could you ride a horse? And you were like, well, for $25 a day, I could. Like, probably not normally, but for that, I'll make it happen.
No task is too large, sir.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't lie. I'd never been thrown off one, so I guess I could ride them.
Yeah, there you
Just
But
said,
after
well, I've never
after the
been
raid
thrown
on the
off.
wagon train, I couldn't say that.
Yeah.
'Cause I ended up in the dirt.
Oh, there you go. But at that point, you'd ridden a horse, so
Yeah.
And you got $25 a day.
the job's now
so-
yours.
Yeah.
That's way fun. And so, how often would those come around? The
Oh,
movies.
there were between the age of 12 and 17 when I graduated high school. I was in 18 different movies or scenes. From the either an actual physical movie or like Duel at Diablo or something like that.
Yeah.
Or in a wagon train series type setting, or the Rifleman filmed there some, and so
That's
yeah.
really cool. I know that you were talking almost at the beginning about with the Native Americans. How close were you guys to them? I feel like that would be like a super cool experience.
Gideon, do you want to ask that question again?
I apologize. I'm a senior citizen and I didn't even hear it ringing.
Well,
How close was I to the Native American tribes?
yeah.
My dad was an entrepreneur. He tried his best to make a living, and so he would hire families of the Navajo tribe to go out in the hills, and they built hogans out of cedar posts, and they actually physically lived in the hills. And we would go out and take them food and things, and they would cut cedar posts for us. And then we would just go out and load those. So they worked for us constantly while I was in my teenage years.
That's really cool. Did you ever stay in contact with some of those people, or like, if you moved, did you just kind of stop talking to them?
I have not. The one that I got the closest to, his name was Turquoise Begay, and he was a 6 foot 2 or 3 inch tall man, big muscular man, and his family was living there with us, and one time I was chasing my little brother around the house because he'd hit me with a baseball bat, and I was going to get even. As I ran around the corner of the house, poor Turquoise, he saw me chasing my little brother and thought I was picking on him when I was just trying to get even. Well, he grabbed my hand as I rounded the corner of the house, and with the I don't know what you want to call it, with the momentum that I had, I just doubled up my fist and hit him. And he says, "Quit being mean to your little brother," and he let me go. And I took off, and he went and said to my dad, he said, Philo, your son broke my nose.
Oh, no.
And my dad was really angry. He said, which one of my boys did it? I'll take care of it. And he started naming off my older brothers, Gideon, Don, Israel. You know, he just knew one of those older boys. And he said, no, the little one, Ashley. And so anyway, my dad says, you know, you hurt him, and that was not right. So he made me go down to the store and pay for a watermelon. I bought a big old juicy red watermelon, and I took it out to where they were camped underneath the tree in our front yard. And I apologized to him, and I gave him the watermelon for his family to enjoy. And he said, no, he said, you stay here. He made me sit down with his family and let me enjoy the watermelon with them.
Oh,
That's cool. Imagine if you could pay for your doctor's bills with a watermelon. That'd be cool.
So nice.
I did not understand that question or what comment.
Oh, I was just saying, like, it'd be kind of crazy if you could still pay for, like, a doctor's bill with a watermelon.
Oh.
Well, Gideon, that's kind of an interesting story. My older sister, Sandy, how did you pay for the doctor bill on that one, Grandpa?
Well, Sandy was our first daughter, and we lived at Dead Horse Point, Utah. I was making $300 a month. And I had Grandma and I and Sandy to feed. And the doctor and the hospital were pretty expensive for my $300 a month budget. So I cut firewood like I learned to do when I was a child. And I traded the doctor firewood, and I sold firewood to other people to pay off the hospital bill. And that's how I paid for my oldest daughter.
That's really cool. Ashton, I knew that you were looking at a book that Grandpa had.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you saw anything that would be like worth sharing.
I know. One of the stories I came across. So, for our listeners, Grandpa, you've made a book of your life story, really, and the family in there. So. Yeah, I only saw, like, there was only a few. I only kind of flicked through to see if I could drum up a question, But, and it's fun because Grandpa's such an amazing storyteller. It's always fun to hear those stories. I was curious, so then Turquoise, he was the same age as, like, maybe your father at the time? And you said he was the one you were the closest with?
I would say he wasn't as old as my father, but
right.
He was a good 10 or 15 years older than I am.
Right.
His children he had children as old as I am.
Right. But you were closest probably with Turquoise.
Him, yeah.
That's
after
really
that
cool.
incident, we were,
right.
And I believe he's the one that named me Yes.
Right. That's way cool to have that sort of relationship, because nowadays you'd never really have that sort of experience. I don't think. Well, at least not for us. Yeah, that's crazy. It's that stupid thing.
Now, I need to clarify one thing.
Yeah.
I do not know the Navajo language, so I hope that I'm not cursing or something when I say Son Yaz was my name. After all, I did break his nose.
So he could have just been making something up for you.
Yep.
Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I do wanted to ask. We, as you may or may not know, we had James on our podcast not too long ago, and he talked about driving the 18-wheelers and how you have 18-wheeler experience, and we got to hear of his, and I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about yours and what that used to be like for you, because you did that for your wood posts, right? Driving the trucks, like the big old trucks.
Yeah, we learned to drive the trucks when I was 8 years old. My dad said, "You're old enough to help on the farm." He said, "Here's a 1950 International pickup." He said, "Take it out in the 10 acres behind the house and learn to drive it. I need your help around here." So I was just a short, skinny little kid. And so I had a gallon water jug that I set on the seat of the International pickup so I could be tall enough to look between the steering wheel over the dashboard. And then when I had to shift the gears because they're manual transmission, I'd slide off the jug, shove the clutch far enough in that I could change the gears and then hop back up on the jug to see where I was going.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
A little scary.
I just picturing that in my head, and that looks
Well,
like
there was
crazy.
10 acres, so the only thing I could run over was a pig or a sagebrush.
Oh, and most of us would just wish to drive at 8 now.
When did you got pulled over though? One time driving back and forth with your brother Steven, I believe, who's younger than you by what, couple of years?
Yes,
And you guys got pulled over driving a coal truck.
yes.
Tell us about that incident.
Well, what we do is we got up at 3:30 in the morning, and we drive from Kanab to Salina, Utah, which was about 170 miles. At 35 mile an hour in those old trucks. We'd load up a load of coal, or we'd load up a load of rock salt or grain, and we'd haul that back to the grocery store owners in Kanab. The grain and the salt, and the coal we would haul to the laundromat or the school for their furnace. And the problem is that all of my classmates that were my age were in school getting an education, and I was out shoveling 5 ton of slack coal into the furnace so I could keep them warm when I should have been inside the school learning things that would help me in my life.
Right.
And I've always regretted that I did not get a good education in school. I got plenty of education with the knocks of life and my life experiences.
Yeah.
How old were you when you got pulled over by the cop going out of town though, driving one of those old coal trucks?
I was 12 years old, and Dad sent Stephen and I to Salina for the load of coal by ourselves at 12 years old. And when I went through Panguitch and coming out a little bit south, the highway patrol pulled me over, and he stopped us right on the hill at what we call the divide, which is where the road goes from Highway 89 over Cedar Mountain into Cedar City. And we were going up the hill, and he pulled me over there with a fully loaded truck. Well, the brakes didn't work on it very good, and so my little brother put both feet up on the dashboard. And emergency brake now, it's either a hand stick one that you pull between the seats, or it's one you push on the floor with your foot. Well, that emergency brake was not a small stick between the seats. It was a tall one, about 3 foot tall. And he put both feet straddled around that emergency brake and pulling it as hard as he could, just sweating. And I said, whatever you do, don't let go of that emergency brake or we'll total out that police car and we'll be in real trouble.
Yeah.
So he wrote me a ticket for no driver license and no muffler on the truck, and told me to get on home with a load of coal so that we could get the school warm. And he let me drive it home after he wrote me a ticket for no driver license at 12 years old.
Jeez. That's so cool. And all the while your brother's just like, come on.
Yeah. He was sweating bullets there, holding that emergency brake so we didn't back over the police car.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the buggy parking brake's hard enough even sometimes when it's been pulled up too far to put down. A little bit different, actually, of an experience. But, yeah, those e-brakes are pretty funny.
So we've been talking a lot about your other, like, all your work experiences. Do you have, like, any other jobs that you, like, have funny stories that you feel like you might share? Like, maybe one that my dad was talking about, like, maybe one with, like, Christmas tree?
Yeah, I got a story about Christmas trees. Two short ones. I don't know how much time we have, but
Yeah.
The first story is we would start in September cutting Christmas trees, and we would get a big loads of them, and we try and cut 1,000 trees for Christmas between September and December. And we paid for those and had a stamp that we put on the trees, a tag, to prove that we'd paid for them. And then we'd take them home and we sold them for $1 a tree. And so if we sold all 1,000 of our trees, that would give my dad and mom $1,000 to buy food and keep us through the winter until spring, till we could start working again and earning more cash.
Yeah.
And at one point a lady came out and she picked out the tree that she liked. It was a beautiful tree. And she said, "How much is that tree?" And I said, "It's $1. And she says, "Oh," he says, "I'm sorry." She says, "I wanted a $20 tree." And I said, "Okay, I've got one around the back of the house that I was saving for our house." And I took the tree that she picked out with me, and I took it around the house, came around the other side, and I said, "Here's the one I wanted to put in my house, and it's $20. And she knew that it was the same tree. She just wanted to help our family.
Oh, that's funny. That's way cool. That's way cool. You know, since this is our Thanksgiving episode, hopefully I'm not out of turn, but and it's Adulting Decrypted, so we talk about adulting things and stuff, and I think all of these are really good because it's life experiences. I just wanted to ask, throughout experiences like these and your experiences, like how do you view being thankful?
Oh, I'll tell you, I have a different attitude about thankfulness than most people, because, at Christmas time, we didn't get gifts like the normal children did. We either got a new pair of pants or a new shirt or new socks or something like that. It was never a toy. Thankfulness, we would, for Thanksgiving dinner, we would usually have just a chicken. We raised chickens and pigs. We'd usually have a chicken and soup. And Mom would put dumplings in it, which is basically just bread.
Yeah.
And cook it in the soup. And that was our Thanksgiving dinner. It didn't have a lot of the trimmings and other things like that, but at least we had food. But now my attitude of thankfulness is, when I wake up in the morning, I stretch my arms out as far and wide as I can. And if I don't hit a casket, I'm thankful.
I love it. That's awesome. I think we can all be grateful to not be in a casket right now.
I'm most thankful for my family, my children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren. That's my big gratitude.
Thank you all for listening to today's episode, and we will hopefully see you guys next time.
Like an adult.
Learn about being thankful for the very first time.
Like an adult. Showing gratitude to the elderly.
To the elderly. Nice choice of words.